Really happy to be here. This report, which I hope everybody downloads and takes the time to review, is a really comprehensive piece of work, and it's very detailed. If you look at the report today, there are 8 different parts. We got into what is the hardware you need, what is the data, what does software look like, how do you implement it, what are the limitations, what are the costs, how does the consumer engage with this? And then what are the next steps? This is really about the action plan to bring this into the marketplace. You know, this was a tremendous amount of work. And, you know, when we look at the different segments of circular markets, you know, we look first always to the waste hierarchy. And like anything else, you know, there's reduction, then reuse. And the same is true when it comes to the tool that digital identifier provides. It provides a lot of help to these other marketplaces, but then what we're looking at it, and we want to look at the lens and the focus today, is how does it work within the textile to textile recycling systems. And it's really great because I think we have a fantastic panel here today. We have Chad Bullock, the VP of Brand Sales at Unify, Natasha Frank, the founder and CEO of EON, Raymond Randall, the Senior Manager of Textiles at WM. And we hope we can get Amelia, who's trying very hard, who is the co-founder and CEO of dbrand, and I'm sure she'll be with us shortly. So what we're going to do is we'll get started by having everyone introduce themselves and talk about how the work that they do today can be supported by digital identifiers, or what does that mean specifically? Because we have collectors, recyclers, and the developers here with us. So let's start with Natasha in this instance. If you would introduce yourself, that would be fantastic.
Sure. This is incredibly exciting. I'm Natasha. I'm founder and CEO of EON. Our company has been working for about 7 years at this point, and this is the culmination of a long effort. So congratulations to the EON team, or I guess rather the beginning of a major effort in some ways as well, to really design and architect the digital foundation for circular commerce. And so we at EON, as Claire shared, we power digital identification of products. So we embed intelligence within each product. A simple way you could think about it is imagine every product has a next generation barcode that's with that item for its entire life cycle, sort of like a digital barcode for the circular economy. So that product can be stewarded and managed through the life cycle. Hey, Amelia, good to see you. And so basically the key to having a digital ID that's valuable is a digital ID that's connected to the circular ecosystem. And so really excited about the culmination of this report, which outlines, and this action plan, more importantly, not really just a report, a real concrete roadmap of how to do this, of how to implement digital IDs such that they can be connected through the circular value chain. And our role at EON is the creation of the digital ID and supporting brands in that rollout and connecting those IDs to some of the circular partners that we have on this call today. So thank you so much to everyone.
Great. Chad, how about you? You could introduce yourself.
Sure. I'm Chad Bullock. I'm Vice President of Brand Sales at Unify. And Unify, we are a recycler and a fiber manufacturer. We're the makers of Reprieve recycled polyester and nylon. And for us, you know, this is exciting because we see the next level of recycling being obviously the textile to textile recycling. One of the hurdles and one of the big areas that we see that need to be addressed is that ability to sort and identify what the product is that's coming in to not only to us, but also our partners that are on the call to better and more quickly get it to the proper recycler and be confident that what you're getting to that recycler is something they can recycle that won't create issues in their downstream process. So I see this as something that's needed, something that is definitely, you know, the way that it's being done today with looking at rare care labels and trusting that information obviously is pretty difficult. So this obviously allows it to be a much more streamlined and more effective way of identifying what that product is.
Great. Thanks, Chad. And Amelia, welcome.
Hi, fashionably late, as they say. Sorry about that. I'm not a technical wizard, but yeah, good morning, everybody. I'm Amelia Leiter, co-founder, CEO of D-Brand, based in Vancouver in Canada. So lovely to see everybody, and thanks for joining us. Yeah, so our background is we're sort of the sorter allocator of goods. So we've been working in this space for quite a long time, almost 15 years. And we're very excited to be witness to the evolution, especially in the last few years, I'd say, of just the scale and digitization of the industry. So we really work, and we've actually already started to pilot the use of a digital ID via sort of a hang tag or a barcode that comes on back through the inventory from our brand partners. So we're sort of look at ourselves as sort of an MVP version of what this could look like at scale across the industry, and really using sort of that return slip or that digital hang tag data to make decisions on where that product should go, whether it should go to partners like Unify or even reuse and resale partners. So that's where we fit into this space. Circularity. Excited to have the conversation.
Great. Thanks, Amelia. And Raymond.
Thanks, Carla. Hi, I'm Raymond Randall with Waste Management, or WM. Sorry, still haven't gotten used to saying WM yet, but we made that change because we realized that waste isn't really our focus. Our goal is to manage materials to their highest and best use. And so we continue to focus on emerging trends and technologies that allow us to do that in new and innovative ways. And so textiles is certainly one of those ways. It's the fastest growing segment of the waste stream, has been for a number of years. And there's so many exciting innovations that enable us to manage that material differently on behalf of our customers. So it's a growing area of focus for us. We continue to explore new ways to manage that material for a number of our large brand and retail customers. And eventually, I think we'll get to the point of being able to do this for residential customers as well, as the technologies and capacity in the market continues to expand. So excited to be on the call today, and love the topic.
Great. Thank you, guys. And, we really want this be a conversation among us. We've learned that understanding the details of what's going on is really what makes the big difference here. And so that's what this report did, right? It got really into the details of all the steps that needed to be taken to make this happen. So I'd like to ask you to talk about how your business is set up today in that detailed way, right? What is it that your processes look like, right? Amelia, you mentioned that you're starting to do something based on a hang tag. How do you, Chad, you're getting in material today. How do you get it in so that you know what it is? And, Raymond, you're at a different stage because you're a different place, which is sort of the great thing about this conversation. And, Natasha, you're trying to be the orchestrator for all this. How does this all work? So it would be really fun. Maybe if we start with Chad, because you're kind of at a different end of this.
Yes. And today it's, a lot of what we do when we're doing textile to textile are capsule programs. They're smaller scale programs where we're very dependent on the partner who's sending us that waste to fit within the parameters that we've set. So we're a mechanical recycler of polyester. So our product, if it's 100% polyester or polyester with up to about 10% spandex, we can run it. But, we also have to worry about prints and other things that are in the process. And today we get samples in, we test those samples, we qualify them. And then it's a lot of it is trusting the partnership that the full waste that we get in is going to meet those parameters that we've outlined and that we've tested for. And in a lot of cases they do, but if they don't, then the issue is caught during the manufacturing process. And depending on where it's caught, or the contaminant where it's caught, can create some very, very unsettling and unpleasant situations in our manufacturing process. So you know, a lot of it is, again, just that trust of, you're telling me it's 100% polyester. You're telling me it doesn't have any plastisol prints. You're telling me it doesn't have any cotton or any natural fibers in it. But if any of those are present, and we don't catch it just as we're manually putting this on the belt through the recycling system, then it can create major problems. So it is a very manual process, I guess, today. It's a lot of trust and a lot of manual checking and rechecking of the product.
I mean, like, I see a lot of head shaking there.
Yeah.
How would you respond to Chad?
Yeah, well, I agree with a lot of what he said. I think it's interesting. When I was sharing this webinar on my LinkedIn earlier this week, I had a couple of comments from my older brother, happens to be an entrepreneur in the space of digital ID for humans. And he said, "Oh, sure, now you're moving into my space." I was like, no, I'm not. But it was interesting because it started me thinking about why is digitization so important for products? And I think it's really similar, and it parallels the same reason why he saw the opportunity. I wish he was on here so he could hear me, raising his flag, but on, for humans is like the unbanked, or people that need, now that we're moving our world to a digital world, we need to have, and this is where Natasha and the work she's doing, that digital twin to represent who we are, so that we can have confidence in, just like we would in a human, that we're doing a relationship with, these products that, unify needs and the specs that they require. You have to be able to have confidence and trust in those. And that starts with data. It starts with understanding what something is made of, how it was made, what the specs are of it. And we've learned a hard way is we're quite a far way off of being able to provide that. So we really tried to test things, like I said, at a small scale, using returns and damages that are ready for recycling as a way to prove that out, and started sort of recognize where those blind spots are. And then our team has worked closely with Chad on a few projects to, we're not perfect either. We're trying to do our best to be that trusted source. We work closely with WM, as you know, to try to create scalable systems that are going to allow us to get that proper feedstock, and that we can be trusted for that. But that all starts with, trying to work with the brands and the manufacturers really to understand what is being put into our products. And so that it comes with trust, transparency, and confidence in that data.
I mean, Raymond, so, Amelia just talked about scale. WM, you guys scale guys?
Yeah, we like things at scale. And I think, we're skilled at collecting and we're skilled at sorting. And that's where the digital ID really starts to come in and transform what's possible. I think the enormity of the challenge at hand requires that we move beyond manual sorting, which has traditionally been how this material has been sorted and graded. And optical scanning is getting some traction, but ultimately the granularity of the information available in digital tagging can completely change what's deemed sort of the highest and best use for any particular garment. And so instead of making some generalizations and not sending different end markets exactly what they need, you really dilute the value of the product when you're making some of those generalizations. And so the digital ID really allows sorting at scale to address sort of the size of the problem and to really feed the end markets, which are growing, daily, just about feeding those end markets the exact material that they really need to be able to drive this industry towards circularity.
I really like the word you used, that generalization, right? Because one of the things that I've learned in the work that we've done when trying to move to circular systems is the details. The devil's in the details, right? And Natasha, you're kind of the go-to person to get the details, right?
I thought you were going to say the devil. I was like, Yes, we are the go-to person to get the details. So that's what we set out to do at EON. I actually may just flash the report for a second because I realize that most people haven't seen it or know it, and we want to entice you to get in there. But basically, you'll see this, everything that we're talking about, you'll be able to download from this report and see the full industry-wide action plan. And so when Amelia talks about creating this digital twin or this digital ID, this is the visual that we're talking about, right? Every single physical product moving to have this, digital twin of it. Every single physical product now, when it arrives at the recycling facility, being able to be instantly ID'd or at the resale facility. And so this is really a massive investment in big data, and what it's unlocking, and why we at EON are so, I guess, overwhelmed by the impact that we see digital ID having, is this is the biggest leverage point into a circular model. Because this is providing the brands and the retailers as well, the commercial incentive to invest in circularity, right? Today, I'd say brands are just in the business of producing and selling a product, and that product gets lost. Now with this ID, as Raymond described, the brands can be tied to the ongoing value of that product. They can generate revenue from the resale, because the customer is going to be scanning that product and instantly reselling through their preferred resale channel. So the brand is going to keep the product, the revenue, and the customer relationship. Now, also, the brand is going to be stewarding the products back through their preferred channels for recycling. And they're going to be able to say, that's my cotton, right? That's my material. And that's going to be giving them the incentives to invest in higher quality, longer lasting, more durable products and materials, because they can sort of steward, monetize, and recapture and reutilize all those assets. And right now, the responsibility and the economic burden of all of that has been falling on, circulators and, recycling infrastructure and municipalities. And I think it will unlock a lot of the financial value for the brands to be able to scale, which is what this report really outlines for brands to leverage that. I also think what's so exciting about having these stakeholders on the phone here is the biggest barrier is actually the communication between the brand and the circular partner. So we view our role at EON is, yes, we digitize the product when the brand creates it, but we need to get that data into waste management, right? So that when waste management receives it, they scan the product, they hit the EON API, they ID it, and we share that data with them. So a lot of that requires interoperability, standards and organization around data, standards around hardware, and then of course, a lot of governance around the communication and exchange of that information. And we believe, philosophically, that this is the interconnectivity that's really going to unlock the circular system that I think we all have kind of, for the most part, dreamed of for a long time.
So you use a term the ability to be interoperative, right? And so, everybody here is talking about how do we scale this, right? What is going to make it possible to scale from the brand's perspective? What are some of the things, Chad, Raymond, Amelia, you're all dealing with the brands on a regular basis. What are some of the things that the brands say to you they need, or what's inhibiting them from scaling this kind of technology?
I'll jump in. When we look at sort of circularity in general for textiles, we kind of refer to a model that applies to a lot of parts of our business, and that is sort of a three-legged stool. We have to have the ability to collect, we have to have the ability to process or sort, and this is where digital ID becomes critical. And then there has to be an end market for it. And so collection isn't really the bottleneck. There's the ability to collect at scale. The challenge is making sure that there's the right facilities in place that can do the sorting into that highest and best use categories. And then the different end markets. So whether that's some form of reuse, whether it's donation or resale, repair, whether it's upcycling, downcycling, fiber to fiber recycling, any of those different end markets, making sure that there's enough capacity in all of those to process the material that can be diverted into those different channels. And so kind of waiting for all those legs to be balanced, I think is key. And I think on that middle stage, we're really in the collection and in the processing side. I think for the processing, for us, we're going to need to have more ability, more processing capacity to do that. And so looking at what is a true textile recycling facility look like? How do we build one that's designed for the future? Not, you don't want to build an 8-year-old laptop, right? You want to build one that's sort of future-proofed, that can lean on where we know that market is going and be able to adapt as the market continues to shift. And so as more and more digital ID becomes more and more prevalent, the facility's got to be able to leverage that if it's really going to get the greatest value out of all the materials that come through it. So I think that's, from our standpoint, kind of what some of the challenges are, is making sure that there's sort of balanced capacity amongst those three legs of the stool.
Yeah, and I agree with Raymond on that, because I think from a recycler, we definitely, where we see a lot of the shortfalls right now are in the prep work, what we call the prep work. I mean, that's basically getting the product ready for us to recycle. And I think a big key there, to Raymond's point, the collection, that's there, but the sortation is the piece that's missing. And I think the digital, the EON, that's going to make this again much more efficient. You're going to get away from the manual way that it's being done today. And again, a lot of it today, when I talk to, and we do sorting on our end when we get products in, just to as a check. But really, you look at a garment, and the best way to sort it right now is you find the wear care label and you look at it. And number one, you trust if that information is correct. But in a lot of cases, if it is truly a spent textile, to use an accelerating circularity term, if it's truly a spent textile, you may or may not be able to either find the wear care label, or you may or may not be able to read the wear care label because it's worn so much. And I know Amelia's shaking her head because she's having to live this every day, where but so I definitely see that as where this is going to help, and what that's going to, I agree 100% with what Raymond was saying.
Yeah, I think Carly, your question was around the brands, and it's tricky. It's like, what comes first, right? First of all, I think there's a lot of appetite for it from the conversations that we've had. I think I like, shockingly, actually, like, I think there's been a lot in, compared to even 5 years ago. I think just the focus inwardly on like the environment and sustainability, and it's just, the world is a little different now, not everywhere, of course, but in a lot of places. And so I think that's the first step, is like really starting to, it's been ignited. So we need to kind of keep putting fuel on that education and awareness for the brands. I think is really important. So these webinars and the work that ACP and everyone's doing is really important. And then I think starting small, like where can we get some wins here? I think looking at the innovations that can be scaled in the next couple of years, how do we get them the right feedstock efficiently? And then proving it out. And I think the digital ID is really so important for the future. I think there's different types of technologies that might complement it, but I think it's going to be hard to beat it in terms of its the comprehensive nature of the data that it can provide. I think is really important, but it is going to take time. There's a lot of products out there. So how do we in the meantime prove the, like, using some sort of manual process, like it's going to be a combination of manual and digital for quite a while. So how do we create efficiencies manually that still allow us to get Chad and others the feedstock they need in the most efficient way, that's still at a cost that the market will bear? I think that's and I think that sounds like this report, and I have read parts of it, not all of it yet, but that the action plan will help demonstrate that or be demonstrative of how to do it. So yeah, I think there's just so much to learn still, and I love learning new things. So I think we're up for the task. And if we can, like I said, if we can prove it out, and that's what we're starting to do, is with everyone on this call, actually, and many probably that are listening in, like starting to prove it out on a small scale, and then making those mistakes now so that we can really build properly for the future and solve this problem regionally. That's a big part of dbrand's mission, is really trying to create regional solutions as much as we can. And while it's a global problem, the impact of sending things all over the world is really hard on the environment, and it's hard from a cost perspective as well. So I think for now, we're going to have to, look at solutions as they come up and endorse those and support them, and then be honest with the brands that, sometimes we're going to have to send stuff overseas because that's where the solution is, or, or the pond to Europe. Like, I think some of those solutions that are coming up there are really worth keeping an eye on. And then some of them are right in our backyard, like Unify. So I think it's a combination of just keeping that openness about how to best scale it in the future.
I'd say do that, Carla. Oh,
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think there's your question was sort of what are the hurdles for the brands, or what are the resistance? I think part of it is sort of the enormity of the challenge. And so we've seen a number of brands see the benefit of sort of bifurcating the issue and saying, all right, well, here's the materials that we've already produced today. Let's develop a strategy for managing those materials. But then let's also think about the materials that we're about to produce, that are about to go into production, that are about to be hitting the shelves. How are we going to design those, right? Design with intent, so that by the time they finish sort of their cycle with that initial consumer, that there's a much greater array of options of how to manage that material. So they almost have to split it in between, all right, here's the here and now, let's figure out how to manage that material that's already been created, but then let's just siphon off the rest that are going to be coming down and start thinking about how to design those differently so that you increase the options. And I think the other thing that's helpful is that the options for managing materials today are not the same options we're going to have 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years from now, right? And so manage them as best we can now with the solutions that are available today, but keep in mind that that's going to continue to change. The supply chain is shifting pretty rapidly, I think, more so than many other industries. And so I think that almost kind of gives you hope that go along with the tide here in the direction that that's moving. We know the direction the supply chain is going to keep shifting.
Yeah. And I was just going to say, and Amelia, you touched on it, and I think one thing that a lot of the brands are realizing now, and I think, again, back to why it's that textiles are complex and garments are very complex, and there are multiple parts of a garment that it just, again, I think they're realizing the complexity of the process now. And to Raymond's point, I think you can't, no one ever ran a marathon. Not many people ever ran a marathon without doing training. And I think we're still in that training phase before we can get to the 26 miles. We're still running the 5Ks and the 10Ks and the halves. And that's we're building up to that ability to run the marathon. And the marathon is where we're trying to get to. But, I think that's an area that I think the brands are realizing that now. And how do we deal with the stuff we have in place today with to Raymond's point, the technologies that are there today. To go back to, if you look at recycling this, 15 years ago, how I'm recycling this today is a whole lot different than it was 15 years ago. And I think that's what you're going to see, in over the next couple of years with textiles.
It's such a perfect lead in, because what I was going to say is one of the things that I think is really critical about this report is it talks about, all of the parts that are required of a digital identifier and what it needs and the implementation of it. So, Natasha, it would be great for you to talk about this implementation, because to get to where everybody's talking about, there was a lot of work thinking about what does the implementation look like for textile to textile, because it's different, right? The brands are going to use this, and it's going to be a great tool for, reuse and resale. And then, but what's the implementation look like?
Yeah, it's really amazing, because we do now have brands making portfolio-wide commitments, and some already being portfolio-wide with product ID. And once it exists, it kind of is like so obvious that you can't imagine not having it, right? It's now a CRM, feels so obvious. Who would run a business without a CRM? And this is basically a PRM, a product relationship management, right? Every product now has that unique ID. And so it's really, over the past few years, what we've been doing at EON is how do we productize that rollout for brands and make it really efficient to build in that implementation process? So I can give you a little bit of overview of, I guess, how that works. And one of the most exciting things about it is that brands already have a substantial amount of the core product data already. They just have it within a siloed data system, right? So if you think about it, the brand has to sell this product the first time around. So they have the MSRP, they have the material content, they have a core set of data that IDs that product. It just exists within an ERP or a PLM, and it doesn't exist in a format that is accessible to Raymond or to Amelia or to Chad. It doesn't exist in the cloud. Right. So basically, the first step to creating the digital ID is that EON basically pulls data from those brands' existing product data systems. We structure and we transform that data in alignment with the circular product data protocol, and we serialize. So basically, today, a brand may have, a SKU. Within EON, each single item is unique. Everyone is a snowflake, right? So this is a unique item. That means this unique item, through its life cycle, it gets scanned. This one was resold. This one was recycled. Every single item is unique. And I think that's an important, visual to plant in everyone's head. And basically, once we have that digital twin of the physical product, right? EON is a cloud platform, so we store and manage that product's data in the cloud. We work with the brand and their factory to associate each product, each ID to the physical product. So you want to think a QR code or an NFC chip within each physical product. Now that may sound complicated, but what's pretty exciting is that factories have actually been attaching care labels and identifiers to garments for years. So this actually works in alignment with the existing tech pack process and is quite efficient to roll out. It's just about embedding it in the product, because by common sense, we should want to ID products, not just from point of production to point of sale, but ongoing. And so basically, we integrate with those existing supply chain systems. And now, instead of in our current business model, we have a barcode on a product and we remove it the moment it's sold because we haven't historically cared what happens later. Now that ID is in the product. And so one of the most important things to structure, and I guess where brands are today in their deployments of the digital ID, is they have millions of products digitized, and they're now starting to connect those digitized products to partners. So that when the customer scans, for example, they could scan and instantly upload to a resale partner, like an eBay or a Vestiaire. They could scan and request the return label to send to waste management, right? They're basically now embedding within the customer experience the ability and the knowledge and the information and the resources to seamlessly steward that product through a circular life cycle. And then on the back end, EON also works on the B2B function, which is connecting that data into the circular partners. And so that's a little bit of the landscape on implementation. I'd say what we found has been the most challenging parts to date is really it's not technical, actually. It's the cross-department collaboration within a brand to get this scaled. So this is so impactful and so valuable to so many different parts of the departments of the organization. It impacts marketing, sustainability, IT, big data, customer experience. So it really is a cross-department group that brands are bringing to the table to deploy this at scale.
And so, everything that you just said, right? It starts to explain how it works. What do the brands need to do? Then, Amelia, Raymond, Chad, what do you guys need to do? What do you need to do to implement this process in your work? Amelia, you want to start first?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think. Well, we kind of already do it a little bit. I remember it was probably like 5 years ago. I remember coming across an article quoting Natasha on just the vision for circular ID, and I was like, oh, that's kind of what we're doing. So at first I was like, oh my gosh, it's like just the same idea as us, but we're very different aspects of that sort of supply chain or circular supply chain. So I think the benefit for us is that normalization of data. Like when right now, for the most part, our data comes from our customer. And that can vary. Let's just say it's very different and it's not complete necessarily, because to Natasha's point, it was never needed before. Really, it wasn't really required for anything. And so first of all, for us, the reason why we started dreaming up about this idea of creating an allocation engine that could make decisions is that, first of all, our decision-making manually became quite complicated for individuals and our team members that are on the floor making those decisions, because there's so many considerations and you just can't, it's very inefficient. Every time you add another decision to be made, it has a compounding effect on time or efficiency. So we realized that we needed to have a computer make those decisions based on data points. And so unlike a human where you can, just have that conversation with a computer, you have to construct things in a certain format. And that's really, I think, what's going to greatly benefit us is being able to get that data holistically and in a similar manner. And I think that's why it wasn't me specifically, but our team helped sort of work with EON a little bit on the protocol of like what sort of data we would need to make those decisions. And then on the back end is working with partners like Chad, who we need to be able to construct our allocation engine to make decisions based on the constraints and capabilities of each partner. And that changes all the time. As Chad knows, like we're still in this training phase, as he said. And so I think being able to make quick adjustments that can all of a sudden reroute a whole group of products to, let's say, Udify's channel is really, really valuable and important. So for us, I'm trying to see how to best answer the question. I think starting to really we're starting to invest more in our software to be, more scalable. It's still in its sort of MVP stage itself. We've been using it actively on projects, but we need to invest in a more robust system. We need to invest in more automation of moving materials, so it's not so manual. So that those repetitive steps or processes that right now maybe a human might be doing, we really want to sort of change that up to be more efficient with robotics and computerization. So I think there's some scaling that has to happen at our sorting level. And then the pre-processing part is an area that we're starting to look at as well, which I think was a bit of a blind spot on our end and maybe industry-wide, I don't know, just to get, because of what Chad's comments were on the complexity of garments. There's some aspects that are great and make great feedstock and are eligible for these solutions, but there's a lot of work that there's other parts that are not at all appropriate. So how do you remove those efficiently so that the feedstock can be useful in an efficient way? So starting to create sort of a marriage of automation and development and innovation around how to best do that.
Great.
Sorry to jump in, everyone, but time flies. We have about 15 minutes left, so maybe we can wrap up the panel because we have some really good questions coming through in the Q&A.
Sure. I'm with you. So what I want to do to sign off on this part of the webinar is I want to ask each of you, what is the one thing or the major thing, can encompass maybe two different things or something, but what's the one thing that you would ask of a brand to move in this direction? And why don't we start with Raymond?
Wow. Okay. I'm going to have a tie for first then. I would say 1, be bold, and 2, collaborate. I think it's a huge challenge at hand here. And so we're going to need to set some big goals, and it's a bigger challenge than any one company or any one innovation. And so I think collaborating will help expedite innovation and scale.
Great. Thank you. Chad.
Yeah. And I 100% agree with Raymond on the collaboration piece. As it can't be done alone. I think being open and not only open to the discussion about, how do we do this together, but open to sharing information, because that's a big piece. Is, everybody thinks they have, McDonald's secret sauce, but at the end of the day, we all need to know, if you're wanting to recycle the product, if you're wanting to make it circular, then you've got to be able to trust the partners that you have, that you can give them the information that they need to then better sort and identify what the products are. So those are my, I guess, two things.
Great. Amelia.
Those are kind of what I was going to say. So we don't need to go. I think just, I think being I think bold or brave is really important, because I always think about clothing as something that's such an important personal, not for everybody, but for a lot of people. Back in the day, clothing was really something that stood out about who we are, and there's a connection there. And I think it gives us a really unique opportunity to bring value back into what we wear, and to create things with longevity, and this whole sort of system of circularity speaks to that. So I think encouraging brands to look at being open and entrepreneurial a little bit, and the way the world needs us to progress and change this industry.
Great. And Natasha.
I would say make a 2 to 3 year, for your brand, make a 2 to 3 year roadmap of when you're going to be portfolio wide with product ID, because you want to think of this as the next generation barcode. And I think what we're seeing with brands is that once they have the IDs scaled, they can start to plug in all capabilities into them, whether it's resale, rental, recycle, your basic, you wouldn't think to run your business without the barcode. And I don't think we should continue to sell and lose products and materials without an ID.
Great. That's perfect. So we have a variety of questions, and we want to make sure that we have the opportunity to answer some of those. So thank you, Claire. You've sent some through so I can see what they are here. So this one's actually for Chad and Raymond, and I think it's a good one, when we're talking about the digital IDs and how they're going to work. The question is, when do you take the metal off the product, zippers, RFID tags, buttons, before they're recycling the items? Because, where do digital IDs sit in that? What happens?
Raymond, do you want to?
Yeah, I'll just describe generally at first the sort of general issue of contaminant removal, button snap, zippers, et cetera. That is a big bottleneck, especially in the US, as Amelia mentioned previously. So there are some emerging processes to take that out. It's also encouraging some of the different end markets, like I think RenewCell's new facility doesn't require that to be removed before they get it, and it goes into their process. So we're seeing some exciting innovation in that space that may not require that to the same extent. So it's definitely a challenge in this space, and something that a lot of different companies are focusing on.
Right. And then from my side too, I mean, obviously we're a lot of metals and things were removed before maybe even before I received the product. However, some soft metals, if they're small, very, very small components that are soft metals, they can actually move through our process. They will get removed in the process, but they don't cause an issue. So again, that's where, depending on how that tagging is, we're going to be able to process it. It's going to get into our process to a point, and then it's going to either be filtered out or fall out.
Great. I don't know if Amelia or Natasha, do you want to weigh in on that question as well? No? Okay, great. So the next question is there a way for individuals to change the data of the item as changes are made to the product? It's an interesting question.
Yeah. I can take that one if helpful.
Great. Yeah.
Okay, so basically there's sort of like two sets of data to a digital ID at a high level. We kind of call them like the digital birth certificate, which is the information that's true about the product when it's created. And then you have the digital passport, right? All the events and items across the events and moments across that product's life cycle that happen when that product is interacted with. So the customer could scan it and reorder it. The customer could scan it and resell it. The customer could associate an image to it of its present condition. It could then get resold on eBay and arrive at Waste Management for recycling. all of those get recorded on the item's digital ID. And we call that the digital product passport. And that's the metadata associated with each unique item's life cycle, which is why that item level ID at inception is so important, because that's why you're able to have a unique life cycle for each item. That also becomes really important for your LCA, your measurement of the sustainable life cycle of the products, because you're able to see, your recycling rates across your brand, your resale rates, all of the data about each product and its life cycle.
Anybody else want to weigh in on that one? No? Okay. Another question. There's a lot of questions here, so I'm sure we can get through them. So somebody's saying very few brands have actual project management plans for their supply chain. Material planning and innovation is part of the problem getting brands to operate in a more efficient and modernized way. I ask this as a project manager who goes through this battle with brands. Anybody want to weigh in on that one? That's really from the brand, what's happening with the brands. Chad, are you experiencing those kinds of things?
I mean, we are. I think a lot of the brands are it's funny how a lot of them are focusing now on what do we do with end of life? How are we managing it? So whether they don't have them yet, I think they're starting to develop some of these, some of the needs. And I think they're learning along the same way we are. I think a lot of people, the interesting thing with this circularity is I think every day we learn something new. Every day we're learning what can and can't be done, what's missing, what's not missing. And it, I think to Raymond or to Amelia's point, I'm not, it changes every day. It changes with every person, with every different brand or retailer we're working with. They're new. I think they're new challenges and they're new things that we learned that they may be doing that someone else may not. And again, that's where, when we went back to my statement is be open and be willing to work openly throughout the industry, because I think we can't solve the problem unless we kind of collaborate. Back to Raymond's point too.
Yeah, I think, at Accelerating Circularity, our goal really is to collaborate with as many partners in different places in the supply chain as possible, specifically for that reason, right? I think it's really about getting into the details, which is something really great about, the digital identifiers. It is in the absolute details. As a matter of fact, the next question is, what are the verification steps for the data coming directly from the brands for the digital identifiers? So I think, Amelia, you might have had some experience with some of that, and certainly with the protocol. Natasha, your point of view would be great on that.
There's kind of two sets to creating a digital ID. There's one step to creating a digital ID is let's just get this product ID'd in its most rudimentary sense, right? Think about trying to run resale if you can't even access the original MSRP or the color or the size or the brand, right? That's about 5 data points that could enable a brand to operationalize resale instantly, right? If we could just get those 5 data points into the product, that would be transformational for circular commerce, right? So we really encourage brands to, even before you're getting in, you're going to be building your ID. Your ID is going to be a journey, right? You're going to be continuously enriching it. Hey, you may start with a factory ID number because you know what factory it came from. You may not. You may start with the cotton traceability, but those are all going to be sort of enriching your ID over time, but you need to get started with just creating the ID in its most rudimentary form, which involves pulling your data from your existing system, getting that data into the cloud, and getting that data associated to the product. And then you can enrich it from various traceability partners. So EON is not a material traceability partner or a factory ID system, but we partner with whoever's within the brand's ecosystem to bring that data in so that cotton information, for example, can come into the product ID such that later downstream, someone like Waste WM, no longer Waste Management, can access, right? So it's about setting up that channel for communication. Like there's no telephone right now that connects that cotton traceability story to the end of life. So first we sort of view, we're building data plumbing. right? And over time, the quality and the level of information is going to get enriched, but we do really need that pipe as the first step.
We have 4 more minutes in the webinar, everyone.
There's one more question that I want to ask just because it's a pretty entertaining question. And then I'm going to have everybody, so you guys can start thinking about that. What is a 1 or 2 words that you would say to the industry, to the brands, to make this transition? So the question is, and somebody's got to answer this quickly, maybe it's another one for Natasha, but do you think there are limits to which categories of product digital ID is useful for? For instance, is there utility to having a digital ID embedded in something like socks or intimates?
So we are working with several very, very large intimates brands, and they're very important to have that ID for recycling. We have not done socks, but intimates definitely have some sort of value, and we steward that. It's also a great way for the brand to build the relationship with the customer to help them build loyalty. So we're seeing a lot of commercial benefits for the brand as well with the ID there.
Great. All right. So we got 2 more minutes. Amelia, what do you want to say to the people out there about digital IDs? Couple of words.
Oh God. It's going, like, I'm going to close with how I started. I think it's going to allow us to have transparency in this industry that greatly lacks it, from socially, environmentally, financially, and it's going to help change the models that are broken. So I think I'll leave it at that.
Great. That's a good one. Raymond.
Yeah, I think it completely transforms how we're able to manage materials at end of use, whether it's getting materials back to brands, whether it's getting them to their preferred next channel, whether it's helping to evaluate whether it's right for resale or donation or any of that. It completely changes how we're able to manage materials for highest and best use. It's critical.
Great. Thank you. Chad.
It's needed. It's something that's again, if we really want to take textile recycling to scale, it's needed.
Thank you. And Natasha.
I echo everybody else. I think to me, it's the business model and the integrity of the product.
Great. And I want to thank everyone for joining us today. I would say, as you get into grow on your journey, this journey of moving towards identified product, please get into the details, look at this. This report lays out everything, like I said earlier, from the hardware that's needed to the data that's required. What does the software look like? How would you implement it? What are the limitations, costs? What is the consumer? How would the consumer interact with it? And some next steps. Get involved, create action. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Carla.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Congratulations, EON.
Bye.
Bye-bye.